The Dreamcast has a lot of weird stuff about it.
Is there much of a reason to buy a Dreamcast?
I guess.
I'm going to gush about Crazy Taxi for probably the next 5 to 10 minutes. Fair warning.
Coming to a podcast feed near you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Podcast. I'm here, as always, with my good friend Cal.
Hello, Murph. It's me, Cal. I'm here to talk about the Sega Dreamcast.
Hello, Cal. Thanks for bearing the lead, I guess. But
no, that's not bearing the lead. That's exposing the lead to the public. They deserve to know.
I suppose you already know what it is at this point. You looked at the thumbnail. You looked at the title. You're listening/watching this video. You expect a topic about the Dreamcast. And so we're going to deliver that for you today. Before we get started with all of the stuff about the Dreamcast, Cal, what is your experience with the Sega Dreamcast? As you're mostly a video game collector, but you're primarily a GameCube collector, but you do dabble in some other classic retro video game stuff, correct?
Yes, yeah. I dabble like fairly extensively in doing my best to experience a lot of different games, have collected a lot of different games, and I would say that I do own every single major home console that was made, if it was not made by Sega. I'm gonna be real. There's no Sega implements in my house.
Not a single Sega thing?
I had a Genesis a while ago.
You got rid of your Genesis?
It broke, and I was not like motivated to fix it, and I was moving away to college, and it had been broken for like 3 years by that time, and I was like, okay, and so I ethically scrapped it.
Understandable. Most people's experience with Sega consoles, from my experience, tends to be the Genesis.
Yep.
Because what came after the Genesis was the Saturn. Nobody bought the Saturn.
Yep.
So nobody had the Saturn, and thus very few people experienced it and its library. The Dreamcast, however, is the other one that if somebody's familiar with Sega consoles, that's probably the other one that they at least know about. And within the retro gaming community, the Dreamcast is very, very well known kind of as this... It's looked back upon very, very fondly, even though it had a pretty short lifespan.
How short was its lifespan, Murph?
It came out in Japan in 98, November of 98. It came out in the US basically a full year later, on September 9th, 1999, very famously, the marketing campaign was 99.99 when the Dreamcast came out. It was $199 on 99.99. So
that's pretty fun. That's
props to the marketing team for coming up with that type of stuff. Was pretty neat. And it went all the way until early, I believe it was March of 2001, is when they announced that they were going to cease production. So as far as the North American release goes, it's like a little over a year and a half, not even 2 years between they announced the system and they say we're going to stop making this system. Now, granted, games did come out until probably around the end of 2001, but there weren't like big tentpole releases for the holiday season like for most video game manufacturers at that point in time. So around 2 years is realistically how much life it had. That being said, it still had over 600 games.
That's crazy.
Over the course of, let's say 3 years, because obviously we're counting the Japanese release as well.
Yeah.
It had a full year head start, and so they had a full year to make games for that. But still, 3 years, 600 games, nuts. That's insane. Think about like the brand new consoles that have come out, the Xbox Series and the PlayStation 5. They are 4 years old now. They have had twice the amount of time on the market that Dreamcast has had. They're nowhere near 600 games.
No. At least not like games that are worth playing.
Yeah, not like a physical. There's probably like
yes, there's probably technically 600 games you could play on there, but
oh, for sure, yeah, because
you probably want to play 200 of them tops. Yeah,
there's indie games galore. Now, not saying that those are bad games.
No,
but those are not.
It's like, a bit different than what it used to be.
Yeah, It used to be. There were bigger budget and lower budget games, but everybody would release games physically because that's the only way that releasing games existed. And so that's just kind of what you got. So yeah, the Dreamcast, it came out $99.99, lasted for about 2 years. But because it came out so early, it ended up being the first of the 6th generation of consoles. Now, if you've been listening to our other episodes before, you know that Cal and I are both big fans of the 6th generation of consoles. Again, if you're not familiar, that's GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox, as well as the Dreamcast.
Does not owning a Dreamcast mean that I'm actually a fake 6th generation fan, Murph?
Not really. Because
okay, fair enough.
It's a little funky in that the Dreamcast basically died by the time...
Before the rest of the consoles even came out.
Yeah, PS2 came out. But the GameCube, which we've already covered, and the Xbox both came out in the fall of 2001. Dreamcast had already been announced to be dead by that point.
Mm-hmm. Kind of almost a weird 5.5 timeline almost in that way. But yeah, the first of the 6th generation consoles, and the reason that it is considered a 6th generation console is because it was pretty dang powerful. It was the most powerful home console at the time of the release, even in the US and PAL regions. Is that what constitutes the 6th generation? That much of a jump? Or is it just, it came out around the same time as the rest?
It's supposed to be, I think, about what it is supposed to be, like, competing with.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Dreamcast was set up to compete with the upcoming generation of consoles. Sega just kind of ran out of money.
Totally unlucky.
Yeah.
Totally unlucky for them. So, it's obviously powerful. It was made to compete with the PS2, the GameCube, the Xbox... if the Xbox had even been announced yet. Yeah, it had been. It was made to compete against these consoles. What did it have under the hood to help it compete on the graphical side of things? What were they packing into these Dreamcasts? What was in the box besides these really funky controllers that you put the memory card into?
How familiar are you with the Sega Saturn? Just out of curiosity.
Also not super familiar.
So the Sega Saturn...
The Sega is really just like my blank zone.
All right. Well, we're going to fill that in today for sure.
Excellent.
So the Saturn is an absolute nightmare as far as like chips and processors go. It has about 8 different chips on board, 2 main processors, 2 graphics processors, more or less. It's not exactly that, but for the sake of our topic today, it was very, very complicated, all things considered. And so trying to extract a good amount of power out of it took time and effort. Think about how like the PlayStation 3.
Yeah, I was going to say much the same to the PS3. If you put in the effort, you would get rewarded, but not all that many people were interested in putting in the effort.
Yeah, and so that was very much the Sega Saturn. But the Sega Saturn, while it did pretty well in Japan, did not do well here. Partially because of the PlayStation, but also partially because people just didn't want to work on it or work with it. And so when it came to the Dreamcast, Sega was much smarter about what they packed under the hood. So they used pretty off-the-shelf components. They used a Hitachi SH4, clocked at 200 megahertz. It has 16 megabytes of RAM, 8 megabytes of video RAM, which when we were talking about the GameCube before, it had 24 overall, and I believe it was 3 dedicated video. So the Dreamcast obviously has like different priorities in what it's trying to do. And all of this came to be like you have a simple CPU. It had I forget what it was, but it was an NEC based GPU, pretty off the shelf. They weren't modified that much. And so the launch price of the system was $199, which again, when we were talking about the GameCube, we were saying $199 is cheap.
Yeah, quite.
Because that's $100 less than the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox that came later. So you could get the most powerful console on the market for $199 when it launched, which is quite impressive, honestly.
Yeah, and it's not like, for what I recall, like something I do know about the Sega Saturn is, much like the eventual Dreamcast, it was kind of a commercial flop, right?
Very much so.
Okay, so it's not like, so... Especially if people were Sega fans and wanted to play Sega games. Say if someone was really wanting to play the newest Sonic game. Not Sonic Extreme, though. That got canceled.
If you want to play the newest Sonic game, sucks if you're a Saturn owner because you did not get that.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to
Sonic R.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to play the latest Sonic game, much the reason why people might buy a specific console or another now still was definitely true then, even more so. If you wanted to play the specific game that the Sega was making, you probably have a Genesis still because the Saturn was such a flop. Genesis at that point was quite outdated, not really capable of 3D at all. I imagine at base there was some amount of people who just like ran out and bought this thing, especially at $199, right? That seems pretty good to me.
Definitely.
What could be wrong with the system that would stop them from doing that?
There were a few reasons. It had pretty good marketing right out of the gate, and so people did buy this. But then hype for the PlayStation 2 kind of started to build up, and everybody was expectant of the next generation of whatever Nintendo was going to do. Microsoft was entering the market, and so sales slowed down a lot.
So this is kind of the thing that we talked about in the GameCube episodes too, right? The GameCube, as much as it's beloved now, also was considered a commercial flop. A big part of that was the PS2, and a big part of the PS2's success, even though it was more expensive, was that it was a DVD player. The Dreamcast, no DVDs, right?
Yeah. So the Dreamcast was the only system that still used something that was like based off of CD technology. But they used something special called GD-ROMs. So the GD just stands for gigabyte disk. So a CD can hold about 700-ish megabytes worth of data. GD-ROM can hold a little over 1 gigabyte, which is a pretty nice increase. But it's not a huge increase, kind of like how with the GameCube mini discs, they were saying, oh, well, it's 1.5 gigabytes. That's way more than a CD. That's twice as much. Yeah, but data was quickly filling up. People would constantly want to put in more full motion video, higher quality assets, all that stuff. And so all of that space quickly got filled up. So 1 gigabyte wasn't actually all that much.
Yeah, 1 gigabyte wasn't that much, especially compared to DVDs. It's like a fifth of a DVD's capacity almost, much less a double layer DVD, which is like nearly 9 gigabytes, right? So
exactly. And the biggest issue with them that I've found is that in order to fit all of that data on a CD-ROM more or less disc, everything's compressed a lot more tightly on the disc. Mm-hmm. So whenever the disc gets scratched or damaged, it is a lot more likely to cause catastrophic damage to that disc. So from a collecting standpoint, when looking back on these discs, it's a lot more difficult to find Dreamcast discs in good condition that actually function than not. You always want to check a Dreamcast disc if you can before you buy it, and to try to check out multiple modes. Like I had a copy of Sega Rally 2 that booted just fine, played just fine, but when you clicked on the multiplayer mode, it would
immediately blew up.
It would throw me back to the main Dreamcast menu. And then, of course, you could boot the game back up from that point, but it would just never access those points because that part of the disc was just too heavily damaged.
That's so strange. I've never actually like personally heard of or seen like a disc do that. Usually when a disc is real damaged, I just think of it as, oh, it'll skip a lot maybe at one specific part, or, you know, like skip a lot in the middle of a cutscene, or maybe just not boot at all. Yeah, exactly. Or get to a certain part of the startup and then it's like, oh, I die. Yeah. But
I've had
just
that
like
happen.
a specific mode is fascinating.
Yeah, that's quite common with Dreamcast games as well, is that they'll boot up a little bit and then be like, actually, no, I'm not going to do anything.
Actually, I can't get past that. My bad.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah. So these things are like super finicky. So that's not the greatest thing in the world.
No, it's not the greatest at all, especially when it is fairly easy to scratch a disc, especially if you're taking it out, putting it in, storing it again, taking it out, putting it back in, especially if you are the, I would say, average consumer of video games at the time of the Dreamcast came in, and you were perhaps a bit less careful with your discs than somebody of our age maybe, or something akin to that. Not that great. If someone scratches up their non-existent copy of Sonic Extreme and suddenly they can't play it anymore a week after they got it for Christmas, no good.
Not good at all. And yeah, I mean, I understand why Sega did that, because it's definitely cheaper than the brand spanking new DVD formats. And they also used a pretty darn cheap laser. Like, if you've ever actually listened to a Dreamcast laser move, even when new, those things are loud. They're like weirdly loud.
Yep.
So it's a cheapish laser, proprietary, scratches easily. Not my favorite, but totally understandable why they did that.
And it is kind of fascinating to me too. It's a lot of, I think it is pretty easy for a lot of people to look back on, the decision that Sony made to go with this like CD plus technology almost, and the decision of Nintendo to try to do with something funky with the DVD. But at this point of time, you know, by when this released in what you said, 2000, 2001, 99, holy
99,
moly.
yeah.
Not even 2001, 99. DVDs were not mass produced until 1996. So the DVD had started being mass produced just like 3 years by the time this came out in the US. With how many, especially around those times, with how many different formats of media were like coming and going, I'm not shocked at all that they decided to go, okay, look, we know that the CD works. We know that the CD's popular. We can fit some more onto a CD. This is a lot of data, guys. That works for us. But of course, hindsight's 2020. By the time some of the later consoles come out, DVD is wildly popular for a variety of reasons, well beyond gaming. It's one of those things that, like, I'm sure made a lot of sense I'm sure at the time it made a lot of sense, but in retrospect, even like maybe by 2001, 2002, or now, it's like, well, duh, why wasn't it just DVDs? But yeah, also they also get to use a cheap laser. Cool.
Yeah, that's super interesting in like the technology sector, is that not only do you have to make a product that is good in the immediate, but you have to make a product that is future proof without actually knowing what the future is.
Yep.
So good luck with that.
Exactly. And I mean, there's a reason why now, like, the physical media we get with most of our games, it's like, oh, here's a Blu-ray disc that does technically have as much of the game as we can fit on it, and you'll just download the rest from the internet. That works, right, guys? And everyone's like, I guess.
True. Yeah. So Sega likes to do things different, obviously. They do this weird disc thing, but probably one of the things that the Dreamcast is most known for is the memory card.
The VMU?
The VMU. How familiar are you with the memory card?
I am actually much more familiar with the Dreamcast memory card than I am with, like, the rest of the console. It, like, looks like a little game, a handheld game itself. Like, the tagline was, like, more than a memory card, right? Is the VMU stand for Visual Memory Unit?
Yes.
Is that what it is? Okay. Yep. So I basically know that it, like, plugs into the controller as the memory card, and it, like, fits into there's the little screen cut out. That's what that's for. I was so confused about that in the abstract for the longest time, because I would see these funky controllers with just, like, an empty chunk in the top, and I was like,
it's for the memory card.
Yeah, exactly. So again, another funky little silly decision to have it go into the memory card, but not that different, because that was just, like, done on the N64 and all that kind of stuff. But I digress. And I know you can play little games on it with its little buttons and control pad that it has on it. That's what I know. And then I assume, surely, the memory card for the Dreamcast operates very well as a memory card and has no annoying side effects. Right, Murph?
Yeah. It does have one cool thing before I go into the downsides, is that if you take one VMU and then another VMU, you can actually plug them together. The way that the plugs work is that they will actually, like, fit together. And so without the need for a console, you can transfer save data.
That's pretty sick.
Because they all have their own little LCD screens, so you can look through memory and you can transfer stuff. It's pretty cool. And
that is pretty sick.
I don't know if any games actually took advantage of this. There probably is, but I don't really play VMU games all that much. But supposedly you could, like, battle your friends and stuff on little games and have, like, little multiplayer stuff.
Can you play the little mini games against each other on them?
I think that was the idea. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's cute. That's a lot of fun.
So it's a really cool idea, but it is brought down by two major factors, at least for me, having experienced and played with these things. The first thing is these things are actually small. They do not have that much space. They have about 1 megabyte of storage, which is the same size as a PS1 memory card, which would be fine, except the PS1 came out in 1995.
Yeah,
and so PS2 memory cards are 8 megabytes. It's 8 times the size of a Dreamcast memory card. And the Dreamcast software is hard-coded to not be able to accept anything larger than a 1 megabyte memory card. So they could never make anything bigger than that, which I have no idea why they chose to do that, but they did. So that sucks. The other thing that sucks is that these things use 2 watch batteries. The 2032 watch batteries.
That's not very much.
Yeah.
Huh.
and they die fast.
And it's two.
Two.
They put too many processors in the Saturn, and they put 2 watch batteries into this memory card. They put no batteries into the Dreamcast controller. Sega, come on, what are you doing? What are we doing here?
Yeah, so that would not be so bad.
Yeah.
But if you actually use the VMU for playing games and use the little LCD feature, those batteries run dry pretty darn fast. So you'll get about 3-ish hours of playtime, 4-ish hours of playtime with those things.
Mm-hmm. That's brutal.
Yeah.
And in that same vein, I know there's like the little screen on the controller, right? Is that used in any way, shape, or form? Like,
when it's plugged in, yes.
Yeah, okay. And then is it powered through the plug?
Yes.
Rather than that's okay. I was waiting for you to say, and yes, the screen also only works on watch battery when it's plugged into the thing too, and so every 4 hours of Dreamcast playtime, you have to replace the watch battery.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, thankfully, it's not quite that garbage.
Okay.
The only downside that you get if the watch battery is dead is when you turn it on, you get like this super aggressive beeping sound, which I don't know if you've ever heard a Dreamcast turn on. You'll probably have heard that beeping sound.
Mm-hmm.
Because
that's what the beeping sound is. Okay.
Most people will just let their watch batteries run dry. Otherwise, you're constantly replacing those. Even if you don't use the VMU thing, you'll be replacing those like every month or so, which is just not that sustainable.
No, that's so obnoxious.
It's pretty obnoxious. So it's very cool, very neat, like this Tamagotchi type thing. You can play little mini games, but it's just a little LCD thing. The mini games aren't that in depth. It's super neat, but not very
cute.
Practical.
It's a fun idea. It's kind of this like I'm talking a lot about Nintendo here, right?
I mean that's kind of like your frame of reference, right? So
yes,
that's
but like that's like something now, like is something that that's something that I'd be like, oh, that's a cute little Nintendo thing to do. Oh, that's a fun little thing to add to your game system, but it's like a cute idea, but it seems like a lot of the execution actually just like added net downsides rather than it being a fun and quirky thing to do, which is. Many people have been saying this about the cute and quirky things that Nintendo does, so maybe somebody should be stopping all of these game developers, all these console makers.
That is Sega in a nutshell. Like, yeah. Well, I was talking to you about this earlier. You had said, "Oh, I don't really know much Sega stuff," and I'm like, "Well, if you like Nintendo, Sega is like Nintendo." But they throw even more stuff at the wall than Nintendo ever does. Even
just more weird stuff. Just like, woo!
Here we go. And unfortunately, that's kind of what got them killed in the end. Yep. But
they were like too quirky.
While they were alive,
there's like a level
tons of fun.
Yes, exactly. Hey, what happened to Sega? They're totally still making games, right? Okay. So
they are technically. Just
I know hardware. They are. I know they are. So the Dreamcast has a lot of weird stuff about it. It's pretty powerful for the time it came out. It's got a pretty nice processor. It's got a good amount of RAM. We said earlier it does have a similar architecture kind of to the Saturn. To help keep its costs down, and it was competitively priced at $199.
It is not similar architecture to the Saturn. It's the exact opposite of the Saturn. Let me be clear about that.
My bad.
It's off the shelf, so it just uses stuff that is.
Oh yes, okay, gotcha.
Like computer parts, more or less.
Yes. Oh, and that is one factoid I know about the Dreamcast as well. Speaking of the computer parts, I can talk about that. We have a weird disk-based solution called the GD-ROM, and they have a weird VMU. Is there anything else really weird going on with the Dreamcast?
It does have other weird things, but for the most part, the other weird things that it does are net positives. They are like actually good things.
Yeah.
So it came with a 56K modem like built into the console. Like the design of the system was pretty neat because it has like a clip-on 56K modem like built into the design of the system, which you can remove, but then the Dreamcast looks kind of weird if you remove that. So you can remove it and replace it with like a broadband adapter, which was sold separately. I think they released like a year after the Dreamcast came out. But basically this was the first video game system that had built-in connectivity for online gaming in 1999. Which is kind of crazy.
That's pretty wild. That's really ahead of its time. Because like the N64 had like kind of tried it with the dead and gone already disk drive accessory.
Ran that, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Ran that. Woo! woo, disk drive, N64 disk drive owners, rise up. There's dozens of you.
Maybe even 100.
Maybe even 100 of them. So a 56K modem that you could swap out to a broadband, that's pretty sick. And I assume then it also had like a pretty big library of games that you could theoretically play online.
Yeah. Yeah, so I had
cool.
a decent amount of stuff. There's like Quake 3 Arena, things like that. Choo Choo Rockets was a pretty popular one. You play like the football games, the sports games online. And even if the games did not necessarily have like a online thing per se, even like the Sonic Adventure type games, you couldn't really play online or anything, but they had like downloadable content. They had like a pack that you could download when it was Christmas time, and it would give you presents. And there'd be trees all around Station Square, all that type of stuff. So it's pretty neat. A lot of games
like
ended
a
up
little
doing
extra
things.
stuff too.
Yeah, a lot of games did stuff like that, where it's just here's a little bit something extra if you have the internet connectivity.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty sick. And it was also the first controller to come stock with analog triggers.
Yeah, have you held the Dreamcast controller at all?
I have.
What do you think about it?
I don't like the angles. The angles are a bit weird on the side. I do like the buttons. I like the triggers. The center screen, the empty center screen always confused me until I learned it was for the memory card.
I don't know who gave you a Dreamcast controller and was like, here, hold this without a VMU in it.
Look, I was probably like looking at it in a game store or something. It's just like,
oh yeah,
you know, here's a contextless Dreamcast controller.
Fair enough.
But I didn't even notice that it had analog triggers, but I guess that wasn't all that notable to me at the time, right? Because I didn't know it was the first.
Yeah.
Pretty sick.
It's not the first to just have analog triggers. Like I know the Saturn had the 3D control pad, which if you look at it is basically the progenitor to the Dreamcast controller that had analog triggers as well. But the Dreamcast was the first one to have it like stock built in. So that was very nice. The layouts, the ABXY, that's the exact same layout you're going to see on Xbox controllers even today. So this controller kind of like standardized that. It did only have one analog stick, which wasn't great. So first-person shooters, not the greatest on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, difficult. And I assume camera control quite hard in the new 3D era. It was a lot of like left and right button activities.
Yeah, a lot ended up getting mapped to the L and R shoulder buttons, which thankfully, because they were analog, you could move them like a lot or a little bit.
Ooh, yeah, like adaptive. Yeah, that's nice.
So I think that was like the idea, is that you could have it for, if it was a racing game or something, you could have that as like your pedal, or it's an analog trigger for like moving camera a little bit or a lot. But it really could have benefited from a second analog stick, at least in... No, I think it just could have benefited from a second analog stick. That's not an opinion. That's just fact.
Yes, certainly.
Yeah. Personally, I feel like the controller is a little bit plasticky.
Okay.
And it feels a little bit cheap. Like, I like the controller. I like the layouts. I like the design for the most part. But it's... Do I like it more or less than the PS2 controller? For reference, I don't like the PS2 controller very much. It's serviceable. And the Dreamcast is kind of just serviceable as well, honestly, when it comes to like form and function. Well, it functions fine, but as far as like how it fits in your hand and how it feels, it's just serviceable as well.
Yeah, I think like basically I haven't been impressed, unfortunately, with the Dreamcast controller in my limited interaction with it. And even like looking at it, I'm just like, I've looked at it and I'm like, that does not look like a great user experience.
Yeah, it's more comfortable than what you feel like it would be just looking at it.
For sure. Yeah, because it just kind of looked like a angular 2DS, but I like the 2DS, so maybe I would actually like the Dreamcast controller more than I think. And it has
weird things like the cord comes out the bottom. I know a lot of people have a problem with that.
Yeah,
but
interesting. Yeah,
there's a notch at the top of the controller, so all you do is you just like take the cord and bend it around a little bit, and then plug it into the notch at the top. And so like it's just a hardware limitation.
Why does it come out of the? Yeah,
because it has two
is like kind of supposed to go up on the top. Yeah,
it has two slots in the top, so you can fit 2 memory cards or a rumble pack. It also doesn't have rumble built in, so you do need a rumble pack, which is kind of like a leftover from the previous generation.
Yeah, just the thing that had not yet actually made the jump for them yet.
Yeah, this was the last controller
sense.
to like not have Rumble
Yeah, to not
built in.
come with Rumble stock. Yep.
Until the 6 axis.
That makes a lot of sense. Boo.
Yeah. So the controller, a bit of a mixed bag, but you can get third-party controllers if you don't like that.
Yep.
So the last thing that the Dreamcast does quite well, that was a little ahead of its time, is that it was the first console to really do 480p. And it could do that
That's pretty
through
sick.
VGA. You could get a VGA box and plug it into your computer monitor. Or nowadays, there's other solutions that you can use in order to get that VGA signal to output, basically over HDMI. Use it through RGB, whatever. There's tons of solutions that make your Dreamcast video signal look nice. And the Dreamcast probably has the cleanest signal of everything from the 6th generation.
Yeah, just like straight out of that VGA port. I am not surprised at all.
Yeah, it is clean, it is nice, it is crisp. Is it as powerful as the PlayStation 2? Technically, no, but oftentimes games would physically look better.
Yeah, just because it wasn't coming out of that muddy AV multi-out, but instead was coming like straight off a PC motherboard into, not a PC motherboard, but borderline,
Yeah, even if you compare a PS2 with component cables to a Dreamcast with VGA cables, the Dreamcast will win 9 out of 10 times. Like, it just looks that good.
It just looks real nice.
Yeah, so definitely ahead of its time in that regard.
They should simply have put a VGA cable on every single 6th generation console, in my opinion.
No, that would have been kind of cool.
Did anyone think of this? They should have just like every 6th generation console should have had a VGA out. They should have used DVDs. They all should have had the GameCube controller. And
you know what? We're just going to take like the best of everything and like put it all into one.
Our ultimate 6th generation console.
Yeah.
Coming to a podcast feed near you.
Now, to be clear, the Dreamcast did not have like a physical VGA port in the back.
Yes.
You still needed a VGA box in order to get that port, but
certainly. So, those games look real nice. What are the games available for you on the Sega Dreamcast?
Ooh,
I have my little factoids up here that I do know about the Dreamcast, like from a technical perspective, and it is like 600 games is like an earth-shattering amount to me, but like with the knowledge of why it was so easy to get games running on the Dreamcast for like 2 reasons. Number 1, the developers of the Dreamcast made it possible for developers to include a copy of Windows CE, which is Windows Compact Edition. It's like a little tiny, absolute bare bones version of Windows that can like run on as small as like a megabyte of RAM. Like as a wrapper, they let people just like run Windows at a really low level directly on the Dreamcast, include it on discs so that PC games could be ported to the Dreamcast with like 0 work. It's just like, hey, here's your PC game. Do a little bit of work to make sure it works with Windows Compact Edition, and then just throw Windows Compact Edition onto the CD, and the Dreamcast will handle the rest.
Yeah, and the Dreamcast was so powerful at the time that it could just kind of like brute force a lot of stuff, which was quite nice. There were a couple games like Sega Rally 2 that was actually built on Windows CE, and that was like a Sega like arcade game.
That's so funny.
It isn't amazing. Like it runs at half the frame rate and doesn't quite look as good as the arcade version. But it did make it a lot easier for people to try to get games like you said up and running on the Dreamcast, which is a nice feature.
Yep. The other factoid I know about, it's actually not about the Dreamcast. That's actually about another piece of technology that Sega made, which was the Naomi or the NAOMI arcade board. Since Sega was a major producer of so many extremely popular arcade games, they could just like build in cabinets. They could just be like, hey, these are the cabinets. It works on this arcade board that you guys can buy from us. And it had like the exact same off-the-shelf architecture as the Dreamcast. Granted, a little more powerful. The arcade board, what ran the arcade cabinets, was a little more powerful than the Dreamcast, so there was a little bit of finagling there. But it was more or less possible to run the exact same game on this arcade board that ran arcade cabinets and on the Dreamcast. So you could very easily, like, just one-to-one get arcade games running on the Dreamcast as developers with no problem at all. And I think those arcade ports do actually kind of form a big core of, like, the Dreamcast's must-have games, right?
Yeah, and I think this was a genius move because with the Saturn, it had a very complex architecture, and the Saturn was built to be very good at 2D games. The problem with that is that what Sega's arcade division was doing was not 2D games at all. It was only 3D games.
Yeah, like crazy 3D arcade games.
Exactly. And so Sega would end up having to do a lot of work, and other developers, if they also had arcade games, would end up having to do a lot of work in order to get those games running on the Saturn. Now, it did end up getting some pretty good ports, like Sega Rally 1 was a pretty good port. Virtua Fighter 2 was also a pretty good port, but they're still pretty compromised when compared to the arcade, and they had to do a lot of legwork in order to get those functioning. I think the poster child for how good the Dreamcast looks at launch was Soul Calibur.
I'm not familiar with Soul Calibur 1. I am very familiar with Soul Calibur 2 through 6, though.
Yeah. I mean, Soul Calibur 2 is an excellent looking game, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And Soul Calibur 1 is basically just like that. So Soul Calibur 1
yeah, sick.
was one of the few games where this was not running off of the Naomi arcade board. This was a Namco game.
Okay.
So it was running off of a completely different arcade board. The Dreamcast version looked better, like markedly better than the arcade. Because it was a bit of an older board. I think the board was like from 96, 97, something like that. So it was a little bit more of a like low-powered, like lower-end board. But even so, this was an arcade game that now looked better at home than in the arcades.
That's pretty sick. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's like a great jump, like for the console to get to have made.
Yeah, this was kind of like the tentpole game to show, hey, consoles are basically where arcades are. There's just not that much of a difference. If you want an arcade game at home, completely uncompromised, and sometimes even better, you can get it. So, also, the game's, like, really darn good. Definitely one of the best fighting games on the Dreamcast. There's a lot of fighting games that got ported from the arcade. There's, like, Power Stone. That's a Capcom game. Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
A classic. I'm very familiar with that one.
Yeah.
I'm also now familiar with the arcade classic Crazy Taxi.
Yeah. So Crazy Taxi was one of the ones that ended up being on the Naomi board. So it was a very easy port job over to the Dreamcast. That was a game at launch that a lot of people really, really like. So Cal, obviously, I have a Dreamcast. I've played this game. What is your experience with Crazy Taxi? Because before recording this, I was like, all right, Cal, I know you have a GameCube. Crazy Taxi's on the GameCube. At least play a little bit of Crazy Taxi, see what it's like so that we can talk about it on the podcast. How do you feel about the weirdness that is Sega's Crazy Taxi?
It is so weird. It's so funny. It's like, it is kind of fun though, because like it's for listeners at home who don't know what Crazy Taxi is, the game itself, while deeply weird, is like at its core very simple. You have the most messed up city map known to man. It makes no sense. It's full of extremely sharp up and down hills that come out of nowhere and really send you flying. You have, if for most of the time it will be playing in like arcade mode. So there's like you're running in very tight time windows because it's made to be hard so they can get more quarters out of you, et cetera, et cetera. But you are driving a taxi in a city, and your goal is to get the people that you pick up to their destination, which is usually a weirdly overly branded thing. Like the original Levi's store or
KFC.
Or like this street Subway, because of course there's multiple Subway restaurants. And get there within a time limit, and like you have a fare. That's your score. And then all the people you pick up are freaks. So if you do like crazy drifts or get big airtime or cut really close to a lot of cars. You can like build up it's like basically a stunt combo for doing these dangerous things and being successful without running into anything. And that racks up your fare, which is your score. And you basically try to get as many people to their destinations as you can before you run out of time. There's also other modes like, just get as high of a score as you can in 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then there's a really weird challenge mode, which I soured on really quickly. But what a funky game. I found it a lot of fun. I played a good bit of it, and then eventually I maxed out on being able to do I don't even remember how many passengers, but I basically hit a hard ceiling on my I hit a hard ceiling on my skill of being able to get people to their destination, and I kept running out of time, and I was like, cool, I guess that's Crazy Taxi.
All right, so now that you have said that, I'm going to gush about Crazy Taxi for probably the next 5 to 10 minutes.
Excellent.
Fair warning. So, you said you have hit the limit of about what you can do with Crazy Taxi physically, right?
Yes.
Do you remember about, not necessarily customers, but, how high your fare was or how high your letter grade was that you got?
I think my highest was a D. Not good.
A D, not good? Okay.
Yeah.
So, here's the great part about Crazy Taxi. It has boosts. It has drifts. It has quick stops. It has all these advanced techniques where you can spin around back up that the game doesn't tell you. The manual does. If you open up the manual and read that, it'll at least tell you some of these things. But it has so many advanced techniques that you can start to learn one at a time. So you said that you could only get so far and you hit that hard skill ceiling.
Yeah, I learned how to do the boost when I couldn't figure out one of the challenge missions and looked it up, and it's you can literally boost. I was like, yeah, oh, okay,
yeah, thanks for telling me, game.
Yeah, exactly. The game didn't tell me anything. It's just a menu that's do you want to play arcade mode or do you want to just have a timer that counts down? And I'm like,
yeah, I really wish the game told you. But
yeah.
If you look these things up and then start incorporating these techniques one at a time, and then your score and the amount of customers that you pick up slowly goes up one by one as you start adding these skills to your arsenal. And it is the best feeling in an arcade game to watch that number go up bit by bit by bit, and you can feel yourself getting better as you are more familiar with the layouts. You start adding all of these skills. So it goes all the way up to 5,000 fare, which is S rank. And then the next jump is 10,000, which is an awesome rank. The highest you can possibly get in the game is 20,000, which is a crazy rank. I've only ever done that once. But I'll usually get about 15,000 in an average run. So I'll usually run for
I think I maybe got max 2 to 3.
Yeah. So did you ever get to the city area?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay. A lot of runs will end up dying in the city area because I just don't like that area.
Is it a bunch of skyscrapers and stuff? Is that what you mean?
Kinda,
by city?
There's blocks and stuff.
I was kind of in a very suburban area.
Did you get on the freeway?
For my time playing.
Did you get to the baseball stadium?
No.
Okay. I want to sit down and play Crazy Taxi with you because it is just so fun to get better and better and better.
You can show me the world.
Yeah, I'll show you the words. I have every single Crazy Taxi game that has ever been made on every single console and all 3 of the mainline games. Did you know they made 3 of these?
I did not. I only knew they made the first one.
Yeah, there's 2 on the Dreamcast, and then the third one was for the original Xbox. The second one, also quite good. It adds a jump button, which really adds a lot to the game in and of itself. Problem is, it's set in New York City, which means that the entire area is a city area, and there's not any of those fun jumps that you have to manually press the jump button, which is probably why they added the jump button to begin with, but it does add
They added a jump button?
Yep.
That's awesome.
It just gets more ridiculous as the games go along. And the third one is probably the best because it has the original map, a map from the second one, and a brand new map based around Las Vegas. So it has the most content. It's on the most powerful hardware. It feels a little bit different from the first game. And it also adds a few new locations from the first game. So it does feel different. But all of these games are excellent. Tons of fun. Highly recommend. They even made a Game Boy Advance version, which is surprisingly accurate Like,
How well does it run?
oh, terribly.
Okay.
It runs so choppily. But all those locations that you saw and that overall map design exists in 3D on the Game Boy Advance, which is insanity.
Yeah, that's insane.
So
I guess that kind of just shows how far. I think that shows just kind of how far technology has come.
yeah. Anyway, Crazy Taxi. I don't know. Is it my top? Yeah, I'm just gonna say it's my favorite game on the Dreamcast.
Nice.
I've sunk a lot of time into it. I have a friend who's also very into it. He'll come over. We'll play. I went to a convention literally yesterday. Guess what I did? Found a Crazy Taxi arcade cabinet, sat down, started playing Crazy Taxi.
Played some Crazy Taxi.
Yeah.
How does it play on the arcade cabinet? Like, are a lot of the same advanced stuff available?
Basically, yeah. So it's a pretty one-to-one. So if you ever thought that it was a little bit weird that drive is a button and reverse is a button, it's because it's mimicking how it works in the arcade, where you have like a physical like stick that you push and pull.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
In order to boost, you have to let go of the gas and then press the reverse button, press the drive button, and then hit the gas again in rapid succession. The timing's very finicky. And it makes your foot hurt a lot in the arcade because like you're pressing the gas pedal, but it's really, really fun to just go.
It's really slick, yeah.
Like just over and over and over again and just like zoom through traffic. Oh, such a good game.
That's awesome.
All right, I'm done talking about Crazy Taxi now.
Well, what other? Okay, so we've talked about every game on the Dreamcast, all 600 of them.
Just
what
play
else?
Crazy Taxi.
Problem
Solved.
Yep. Fair enough.
All right, so those are some of the arcade ports, but there are a lot of like exclusive games for the system, at least exclusive at the time of when this system came out. So two of the most prolific games are the Sonic Adventure games, Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2. Sonic Adventure 1 was the one that came out with the Dreamcast, at least in North America. This is the one that brought Sonic into actual 3 dimensions. So this is what a lot of people were waiting for a long time. And honestly, I'm kind of glad that they skipped the Saturn because I don't even want to know what a Saturn 3D Sonic game would look like. Actually, I kind of do. It would be like Sonic R, which is whatever. But Sonic Adventure 1 really does a great job at making you go fast and having a big, expansive, open level design that you can just kind of run around in. It's got hub worlds, all that jazz. Really showed the power of the system. And then Adventure 2 is also a fan favorite. It's got that was the first introduction of Shadow the Hedgehog. That was its whole shtick. They both have the Chow Garden, which is a ton of fun. Have you played Sonic Adventure 1 and 2? Both ended up getting ported to the GameCube. Have you played either of these games?
I have played a good bit of Sonic Adventure 2, also in between the time when we started talking about the Dreamcast and time of recording.
Excellent. What are your thoughts?
I played the villain side because, of course, when I get the chance to play the villains, I'm going to give it a shot.
You didn't play City Escape, though? That's like one of the most classic levels in all of video games.
Not yet.
Oh, Cal, you're missing out.
Is that like mission 1?
That's mission 1. It's literally mission 1. It's literally Sonic is in a helicopter, rips a wing off of the helicopter, and then skateboards down the streets of San Francisco.
Okay, yes, I have seen that. I have seen that. I really enjoyed what I played. I could definitely tell that the game was designed to. I could tell that it was. I mainly found it best to control the camera with the L and R buttons rather than with the C stick like I'm used to because I was playing it on the GameCube. But I really enjoyed what I got to play. I got through like the first 4 or 5 missions on the evil side, and it was a lot of fun. The first mission was really boring.
Yeah, I mean it's like
Robotnik. Yeah. Oh yeah. Ooh,
and he goes in and it kind of gets you familiarized with the controls and stuff, and it's not as high energy as the hero story beginning.
Yep.
You most of the time like people will start on the hero story.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they kind of expected you to do.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I'm sure. I thought about it and I was like, I've been Sonic and Tails a million times. You know who I've never been?
Shadow.
Any of these bad guys. Yeah. I do also own Shadow the Hedgehog for the GameCube. I've been meaning to play that for a long time.
That game is not very good. Adventure 2 is a much better game.
Never mind.
Also, finish Adventure 2 if you do want to play Shadow and have the story make any sense whatsoever.
Oh, perfect. Just a little sequel action?
Yeah, basically. It delves more into Shadow's backstory, a little bit more of that type of stuff. Also, Shadow's weird because it has like 10 different endings that you can have, and none of them are canon. And you have to finish all 10 of them, and then you do get the canon ending.
That's annoying.
Yeah.
That's annoying.
Very strange, very interesting. Did you get to the Chow Garden, though?
The Chow Garden? I do not think I did.
Okay. So, what I want you to do after this is...
I was about to say, my main takeaway from the game is that I actually quite enjoyed it, and I would like to keep playing it.
Yeah.
Has been my main takeaway. I didn't get like a ton of time to play. It's like specifically Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, right?
Yeah.
Which is like Sonic Adventure 2 Plus or whatever.
They expanded the multiplayer a little bit and made some tweaks to the Chow Garden, which are actually quite good. I picked up the Dreamcast version because I was like, oh, I know that the Dreamcast gardens are like more fun. Mm-hmm. Like there's an entire cave in the villain's Chow Garden and everything. So it's more neat, but as far as like the core systems, the GameCube version builds on that and is just much better. And again, like I thought it would be cool to have like your Chow, you put it on your memory card, and then you can take your Chow with you, kind of like a Tamagotchi with the visual memory unit.
That's fun.
Which is pretty cool.
That's a cool idea.
But you're missing a lot of key features that the GameCube adds. Like you can't see your Chow's stats until you transfer it to your memory card and pull it out of the Dreamcast.
That's weird. Oh, and then it's like on the screen or whatever?
Yeah. So then you have to pull it up on the memory card, which I thought was so bizarre.
Yeah,
because on the
GameCube,
very
strange.
All you have to do is stand next to your Chow, and it'll show you, or pick him up, I forget what it is, and it'll show you the stats. So they redid the stats. They added the black markets where you can like buy extra stuff for your Chow. They expanded lots of stuff in that. Anyway, the Chow racing system is very deep, very complex. I know a lot of people that spend a lot of time in it. So whatever you're playing your next level, if you ever see a blue box...
I do have one of those. I found one of those.
You found one Chow key?
Yes.
Yeah. So did you get teleported to the Chow Garden?
Not when I got it. I think I might have not finished that level. I like found it and then I didn't finish the level. So if I found the Chow key and then get to the end of the level, I'll go to the Chow Garden.
Yes. Okay. And then after you do that, then you can visit it at any time with that specific character. So you just get the Chow key once with every single character and you can visit it anytime.
Oh, okay. At any time. Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah. So that is a lot of fun. I like both those games. They're both like, there's a little bit of jank in there, ye old Sonic Team jank, but overall excellent experiences, lots of fun.
Yep.
I marked down for exclusive games the NFL 2K series. Mm-hmm. So did you ever play the 2K games?
I have not played the 2K games. I've played a lot of Madden, but that's entirely different from the 2K games.
So the ESPN, what it came to be known as the 2K games series, was a really, really good rival. We'll just talk about NFL games in this, but they did it for some other sports as well, like baseball. So the NFL 2K series was really excellent. It came out at a cheaper price than Madden. Like I know the 2005 edition of NFL 2K was $20.
Yeah, I know that 2K 2005 was so competitively priced and ate so much of Madden's lunch. That's when EA finally bucked up to pay the NFL a ton of money for exclusivity rights, and that's when the series went away.
Yeah. So that's kind of what killed the 2K games. But
no, it was too popular. No.
But up to that point, the NFL 2K games were like probably the best things that you could get on the market sports-wise, other than EA sports games.
Yeah.
The NFL games, again, I'm using that as a point of reference because I have NFL 2K1, or maybe I have NFL 2K. I think I have 2K1. You can call plays on your VMU. So if you're playing multiplayer...
That's awesome.
It is only a list because it's a little LCD, so it doesn't have like the plays all listed out. So you do have to be at least a little bit familiar. But you can be
real sneaky with it because you can only look at the little screen on your controller.
Yeah, so you have to be familiar with what the plays actually do. But once you're familiar with what the plays actually do, you can select only on the VMU, and so people can't see what plays you're playing, which I think is super fun and changes the dynamic of like couch NFL multiplayer a lot.
Definitely. Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I'm in.
He's in. Some other fun games. Skies of Arcadia. this is also a GameCube game. Have you had any experience with this game?
I do not have any experience with Skies of Arcadia. I do own it on the Nintendo GameCube as well.
Great, that's an expensive one.
However, I do not own it IRL. I mean, I do own it IRL. I have not played it.
Yeah, I got about halfway through it and then took a break, and I do need to get back to it, but it is very fun RPG. Not really voice acted or anything. It's still like kind of text based. It is probably like classical form of RPGs before Final Fantasy X like kind of took like old fashioned RPGs and kicked them out the door. Skies of Arcadia is like the last vestige of that, which I think is a lot of fun. Space Channel 5, great rhythm game, tons of fun, super quirky.
I do love rhythm games.
Yeah, Jet Set Radio. Like another classic game.
Oh, okay. I can get Space Channel 5 for the PS2. Perfect.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Excellent.
So Jet Set Radio is a fun one. Excellent soundtrack. Even if you don't play the game or haven't played the game, just listen to the soundtrack.
It's awesome. Yep.
It's so good. Phantasy Star Online also got ported to the GameCube and Xbox. Have you played that one?
I have dabbled.
Yeah.
On the GameCube. Yep.
I have not played Phantasy Star Online, but that was made by Sonic Team.
That's crazy to me.
So, yeah, Sonic Team,
a little bored. Gonna make a little Phantasy Star Online action.
Sonic Team was on fire. They made Sonic Adventure 1. They made Phantasy Star Online. They made Choo Choo Rocket. And they made Sonic Adventure 2. All before the Dreamcast died. Like, crazy. What a great output.
That is pretty awesome. Yeah, exactly.
And then...
Yeah, Phantasy Star Online, it's fine. It's action RPG. It's a fine one, you know.
Presumably better once the online servers existed. There are...
Yeah, and there's like fan-run servers now to this day. I know there are for the GameCube. I assume there are for the Dreamcast as well.
Yeah, you can get the 56K modem back online with Raspberry Pi emulation. I want to do that at some point, but I haven't really dabbled.
Yeah, just to do it. Yep.
And then I think the big daddy of them all as far as big budget Dreamcast games, gotta talk about Shenmue.
Do we?
I mean, yeah. Like, this was the most expensive game ever made at the time. So...
Unreal.
Do you not like Shenmue? You're like shaking your head.
Well, what I know about Shenmue is pretty much that Shenmue 3 was terrible. That's what I know about Shenmue.
So here's the problem with Shenmue 3. Is that Shenmue 3 has a surprising amount of disregard for every single video game advancement that's happened since Shenmue 2, which came out in 2001.
Yep.
So Shenmue 3 very much feels like a follow-up to Shenmue 2.
Yeah, it's a very much a Shenmue game.
Yeah, it is very much a Shenmue game. So I can respect it at least for that. Problem is, there's been a lot of video game advancements that have like made video games better as a medium as a whole since Shenmue 2 came out.
Yes.
So, yeah, Shenmue 1 was for the Dreamcast. Shenmue 2 came out for the Dreamcast in PAL regions and Japan. Shenmue 2 came out in the US only on the original Xbox.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very interesting, very fun game. Sometimes it can be like weirdly frustrating because you're like, what do I do? Where do I go? But thankfully we have the internet.
Like, where am I? Yeah, exactly. You can just Google it.
Exactly.
And it's pretty much like it is like an RPG game, right?
It's very much like, have you ever played a Yakuza game?
Yes, I have.
It's like the progenitor to that.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's like a kind of old-fashioned version of that. They had like very highly detailed 3D models. So you could go around and like open a drawer, pick something up and look at it, turn the model all the way around. Just cause.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, I would consider that kind of wasted development time and wasted resources because it's not really adding to the game, but it was very cool at the time that you could kind of do that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, also,
that's pretty slick.
The fact that it didn't have a second analog stick hurt a lot for Shenmue specifically, because guess how you control the character? The D-pad. You control the character with the D-pad.
Oh, no.
And the analog stick looks around.
Yeah.
It really could have used a second analog stick.
That's brutal.
Yeah. So, Shenmue is not my favorite game for sure, but I definitely respect what it is. And I enjoyed my time playing through it because I did end up beating this game. I haven't played 2 yet, but I did play 1 all the way through.
Yep, that makes sense. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
The granddaddy of them all.
Thanks.
The most pricey video game.
Yep. Well, not now, actually. It's been re-released, and so if you want to pick Shenmue up.
Yep.
Oh, you meant as far as like production-wise.
Yes.
I just clicked in my mind. Oh my gosh, I'm way slow, way behind you.
Yep.
So we got lots of great arcade games, lots of great exclusive games, but another great part about the Dreamcast is it has a lot of good multi-platform games. So because it was the most powerful system at its time and came out a full year before the PS2, there's like a good year in there where if you got multi-platform games, it would be best on the Dreamcast.
Yeah, best on the Dreamcast. Yeah, because it was the best.
Yeah, so like Toy Story 2, I think it's Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue, I think is what the subtitle is for like the PS1 and N64. Got a port to the Dreamcast.
Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. Yep.
Really good.
I did just Google Toy Story 2 and then was surprised when I just got a bunch of stuff about the movie. I was like, oh, let's check this out. I'd look at the Wikipedia article real quick.
Not what I'm looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. The Tony Hawk games both got ports to the Dreamcast.
Great games.
Great games. You played them
Very
in 480p,
familiar with those.
30 frames per second, rock solid, made by Treyarch. So that's pretty cool. Rayman 2, best on the Dreamcast. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer gets all of the... Well, I guess this was kind of an arcade game too. I put it in the multi-platform game, but most people remember it as an N64 game. But it got all of the FMVs from the arcade version put back into the game because of that increased size.
And I assume it is also like better performing.
Oh, definitely.
Maybe it looks a little better. I know I am very familiar with 3 of the 4 games that you were talking about here for like the multiplats, like Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I've played a lot of that on the N64. Rayman 2, I've played a lot of that. Tony Hawk games, have played a lot of those. But so it's just like not... It's good for me to know that there is a version of Star Wars Episode 1 Racer out there that looks good.
Yeah, it looks good. It runs at a very solid 30 frames per second, which I know if you are not somebody who played video games at this time and you're like, oh, it's not 60 frames per second, that sucks. A rock solid 30 frames per second at this time in console lifespan was pretty good. Like, that's pretty good.
It's very good.
So, yeah, lots of great Dreamcast games. But one big problem with the Dreamcast that we haven't really talked about.
We're at the big problem?
It's not the big problem. It's an interesting problem, though.
Okay.
So, Sega specifically tried to do the GD-ROM formats to help combat piracy. Yeah?
Yep.
Well, it turns out there's an exploit by using, I think it was, like, karaoke machines that kind of worked on the same basis of a Dreamcast. Someone was able to find an exploit in order to figure out how to make burned discs on a Dreamcast. So, if you have version 1, or version 0 or version 1 of a Dreamcast, all the way up until like the very latest models, you can just play a burned Dreamcast game without the need for a boot disc.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So
that's not great.
In their
that's
effort
not great for the sales
to try to like combat piracy, they accidentally made a format that was like stupid easy to pirate because people were able to break it.
Very unlucky for them.
So that definitely did not help the Dreamcast back in the day. The lack of consumer confidence in Sega definitely did not help them back in the day. Because, like you said, you were familiar with Sega from the Genesis and not much past that. That's the case for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because Sega was like, here's the Genesis. It's awesome. Oh, CDs are the hot new thing? Here's the Sega CD. Awesome. Very cool thing. Oh, we want to get into 32-bit systems, but our Saturn's not ready yet. Here's the 32X as like a stopgap. Oh, that took a little bit longer than expected. That was like 6 months before the Saturn released. So all of these like different products are really cool in isolation. Like the Sega CD, pretty awesome. The 32X, pretty awesome. But trying to put all of that together in the markets, like the 32X competed with the Saturn. Like, what the heck? Don't put 2 systems out there that compete with each other.
Well, and that was kind of one of the really tough things was that even by the time the Saturn came around, I know that like actually the Genesis was still so popular in the US that they had kind of stopped to prepare for the Saturn. They had kind of stopped making Genesises, and they missed out on a ton of Genesis sales. Genesis's sales because they were pushing the Saturn instead. And I imagine at some point in time, since all this stuff, I imagine there was almost a point at which like the Dreamcast was borderline competing with the Genesis and the 32X and the Saturn. They all came out in such a narrow time frame as each other.
Because the Genesis, like, you gotta understand, technology advanced at such a rapid rate in the 90s. Like, it's crazy. You think about 10 years prior to now. What did video games look like? Like PS4, Xbox One era. Still pretty darn similar to what they look like now. Like, they run at 720p or 900p or 1080p. Now we get them at 4K. We have more advanced lighting effects, yada yada. Stuff does look better for sure. But if you take about, like, the Dreamcast came out in 1999, right? And you get Sonic Adventure and Soul Calibur. What was video gaming 10 years before that? Well, 1989, Super Mario Bros. 3 wasn't even out, at least in the US.
That's wild.
So, yeah. That's crazy.
That's absolutely insane. So, they really ruined it for themselves.
Yeah, it was. They just kept releasing things that they thought would be cool, flooded the market with stuff, and then dropped it immediately after. Have you ever used like a Google product?
Oh, yeah.
And you know how Google likes to put out these cool, fun products and then drop them after like a year or two?
Immediately. And now no one bothers to use a lot of people just don't even bother to use cool new Google products or rely on them anymore because they know that they'll just be dropped.
That's how people felt about Sega back in the days.
Yep.
Because by the time Sega actually got their act together and put out something that was legitimately great, sure, the Dreamcast had its problems. It was too late and people did not care enough. And so that just completely hurt them. But
that makes a lot of sense.
Nowadays, the Dreamcast has kind of a pretty big legacy. A lot of people, or at least people who did end up playing the games, will look back on it pretty darn fondly. And Sega still is going as a publisher. Like, they are still making games.
Yeah, they still definitely make a lot of games.
Which is good for us, because that means that these games can get ported to other platforms. So we've been alluding to it this entire time, but most of the best Dreamcast games you can play on other platforms. Like, you don't need a Dreamcast in order to play these games. Now, there are some games that might potentially be the best on Dreamcast. Like, I know Sonic Adventure DX has a lot of problems. Like, it has worse lighting, the character models are a little bit funky, it added glitches and stuff. It upped the frame rates from 30 to 60, so that's nice. So it's not a total wash. But you still can play these games.
And that's a big part of why I have not ever really like felt the need to go out of my way to pick up yet another console and get it hooked up into my setup, because like anytime I have been like, oh, what would I get out of owning a Dreamcast? And I look up the game list and I'm like, oh,
I already have those.
The major games I own, half of them, and of the remaining ones, it's like, oh, I could just pick that up on the PS2. Oh, I could pick that up on Xbox. If I really wanted to, I could play that on Steam, like at this point. Even then, they were ported everywhere. Now, you can play them anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Like Crazy Taxi got ported to the GameCube and PlayStation 2. Again, I'm pretty sure it's not that hot of a take to say that it played best on Dreamcast, because that's the closest to the arcade, and so it survived the porting process the best. It had all of the original voice lines. The voice lines got replaced. I have no idea why for the GameCube and PS2 versions, and then eventually all the branding got lost. The licensed music ended up getting lost. So if you play the PC version now, it has none of those things.
Which stinks.
But there's mods to help put it back in, which is why the modding community is amazing and the PC community is amazing. Same thing with Sonic Adventure. Like, if you like the original aesthetic of Sonic Adventure and you want the modern port to look more like that, just download some mods and away you go.
Which is so convenient and so nice.
Yeah, exactly. Like Jet Set Radio has gotten an HD re-release. Shenmue 1 and 2 has gotten a HD re-release. You can do Phantasy Star Online on both the GameCube and Xbox, like we said. So, is there much of a reason to buy a Dreamcast? Not really. It's a ton of fun. It's a really, really cool console. And I love this thing a lot. but there isn't a huge reason for you to do so, aside from if you really like these games. Like for me, I love Crazy Taxi, and so going out of my way to get the best version of that, I think is worth it. But unless you really, really like Sega games, if you have even just a passing interest in Sega games, you can probably just pick them up on a different platform, and you'll have a great time regardless.
One of these days, I'm sure I'll end up with one. Just to have one.
Yeah.
Just to have one. When eventually I say, you know what? I should own all of the Sega consoles.
Yeah. Start with the Genesis. I think you'll have a better time with the Genesis, especially since you have history with
certainly. It. Yeah, and it's like it has a lot of classic 2D games on it, actually.
Yeah. Start with the Genesis, then work up to the Dreamcast, and then maybe the Saturn if you're a crazy person like me.
Yep.
Because collecting for the Saturn is probably like the worst thing ever.
Is it just incredibly obnoxious to get anything for?
Incredibly, because nobody bought anything, and the cases break all the time because they're in like those big giants long boxes that like early PS1 games came in, and then they decided, oh, that's a stupid idea, let's not do that. Yeah, Saturn did that the entirety of its life cycle.
Classic.
So trying to find stuff in good condition with the full case and manual is just a huge pain in the butt. And the games are just so rare. They're so expensive. Like Mega Man X4 for the Saturn. Disc only is like $200 or something. It's like stupid.
That is crazy stupid.
I have X4 disc only. I have a reproduction case. And I played it on the Saturn. But if I did not already own it, then by golly, would I not pay $200 for that? I would buy
you simply would not.
Classic collection, or buy it on the PS1, and it would be just as good and awesome.
Yeah, you would just have it simply then. Fine, I'll buy the 3DO interactive multiplayer.
Exactly. But that is a topic for another time.
All right. Let's move on to our single recurring segment of the show, where we just talk about what we've bought, what video games we've bought recently. Murph, you've gone first every time. And you have a lot more to talk about this time than I do. So I'll go first this time. How about that?
All right, shoot.
I have purchased 3 games since our last time together.
Ooh. Murph. Hit me.
2 of them are GameCube and 1 is not. That's first
to be expected,
is, of course,
I'll be honest.
Naruto, Shonen Jump's Naruto, Clash of Ninja. This is just like a really funky, fun fighting game. I've dabbled with it around in the past. It's based on Naruto. It's just fun and funny.
I noticed that it says only for GameCube. And that's...
Yes,
did it ever get ported anywhere else?
That's a good question. I don't know. A lot of the exclusive to GameCube stuff did not.
Except for Resident Evil 4.
That doesn't count. Let's see. Naruto Clash of Ninja was technically ported to the Wii.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they must have remade it, I guess. Or maybe it's just because you technically can't play it on the Wii. I don't know.
Yeah. Probably just ported because, GameCube to Wii conversions cannot be that difficult.
Yeah,
but
also, not at all. Yeah.
Also, Wii games or Wii consoles can't just play GameCube games, so why would you do that unless you want to add motion controls? Anyway.
Yep. Let's see. And then my second pickup, check this out.
All right.
Monster 4x4 Masters of Metal. It's exactly what you think it is. It's a monster truck game where you can race or you can just drive around a little open world level and run over a bunch of stuff, or you can do stunts in competition with a second player. You can go off a lot of jumps. It is just a Monster Jam licensed monster truck game. I played it a lot when I was a kid. It's just yet another game that I would like to own for the GameCube, so I picked it up.
I'm actually surprisingly familiar with Monster Jam games as well. Yep. I played a good bit of...
Look, we were young men once.
Yeah. I played Monster Jam, I think it was called Urban Assault or something like that. Something like that for the Wii. That was a multiplayer one that I played with my brother and cousin who really liked Monster Jam a lot.
Classic. They're just a heck of a lot of fun, in my personal opinion.
Oh, they're so fun. I used to go to Angel Stadium when I was young and just watch them crush cars and be like, yeah, this is the coolest thing. It's a little 8-year-old me.
I did actually get so sad. I learned that Monster Jam had come through Columbus recently.
Oh, no.
And I was
And you missed it?
And I missed it. And honestly, if I had known, I would have gone. I simply would have gone if I had known. I bought another game. It's a Rayman game for the GameCube. I forget which. It's like a weird fighting game. As well, but
not Rayman 3.
It's not Rayman 3. But I thought I was buying it like complete in box, and I was not paying enough attention to the eBay listing, and it's just a disc. Ooh. So it's languishing in my little disc container of shame. I'll get a case for it eventually. But here's the thing that I picked up that I think is definitely the most notable of the games I picked up, and that is a little something called Final Fantasy Chronicles for the PlayStation 1.
Yeah.
Which is a weird little combo pack of Final Fantasy 4 and, of course, Chrono Trigger, which is why I bought it.
Because you don't want to spend like $200, $300 or whatever it is for Chrono Trigger on the Super Nintendo?
Even the DS port is $1 billion these days, relative. So,
yeah,
I'll take my wins when I can get them.
Let me know how it is, because I know
for sure.
What I've heard is that the load times on that aren't amazing. So if you feel like the load times are, serviceable, workable, I'll probably also jump in on the Chrono Trigger on the PS1 as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I've heard from literally everybody, hey, you should play Chrono Trigger. Hey, you should play Chrono Trigger. I'm like, it's on my list. I'll do it at some point.
I'll get there eventually.
It's not that I'm actively avoiding this game. I'm actively avoiding that price tag, though.
Yes, definitely. And I also did get a little... I bought this for someone off Facebook Marketplace for like a decent deal, and it like came with a technically broken PS1, like the tiny one, and I'll try to get it working again. Like it's the little cute square one.
Oh, with like the rounded corners, the one that was like branded PS1. Yeah. Yes,
PS full word 1. Yeah, you could get a little screen to put on it. So I'm gonna try to see if I can fix it or whatever.
Super neat.
But I bought it because it came with this. But I opened it up, and there was also a little Parasite Eve disc 1.
Oh,
so that's like a not cheap. That's like not exactly a cheap PS1 game. I think like if I had the case and everything, it'd run me like $50. So now I can play half of Parasite Eve if I want to.
Well, at least it's disc 1, and so you can play it.
Yeah, exactly.
See if you like it.
It's not like it's disc 2.
Yeah. And if you don't like it, who cares? Just don't buy disc 2.
Or I could like just try to sell disc 1 loose for like $20. Easy. So that's my pickups, Murph.
Nice.
What are your pickups, my guy?
So yesterday, I kind of already said this in the Crazy Taxi bit of the show, which is my favorite part of the show, is I went to the SoCal Gaming Expo convention, whatever it is, at the Pasadena Convention Center yesterday. Technically, it's still going on today. I think as the time of recording, the doors are literally just closed or are about to. So this is a big gaming convention that has a ton of vendors, panels, voice actors and stuff, people in the community that you can come and talk to, get signatures, listen to what they have to say at these panels. They have arcades all over the place. They have like a console free play area. So they also had Crazy Taxi there. But you could just like play, like they had E.T. for the Atari 2600 plugged in. You could just play that.
That's pretty fun.
And they had a guy that was just standing by. So then whenever somebody stood up, he would go over and like wipe down the controller and sanitize it ready for the next person. And I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I love this a lot.
This sounds like a lot of fun.
One thing that you'd also love is one guy brought his 16-player Mario Kart Double Dash setup.
Oh, my dream. That's my dream. I just want to do that like once before I die.
8 GameCubes and 8 TVs. And it was awesome.
So it's like what, two people to each TV?
Yeah. So whoever you're paired with. Because there's only ever 8 racers in Double Dash.
Yeah, there's only 8 racers at once. Yep.
Yeah. So it was super fun. I realized very quickly that, oh yeah, I suck at Double Dash. It's probably the Mario Kart game that I have the least amount of time sunk into, and I definitely need to play more of this game. But wow, was it fun. Wow, was it cool. And at the very least, I do want to do like a LAN Double Dash with just like 2 GameCubes and like 4 players a screen so that you can fill up like all 8 spots. Because I do have everything for that.
So fun.
Except for the broadband adapters, which are like 100, 150 or whatever it is. It's just so hard to justify paying $200 or $300 for doing this one thing that you'll do maybe once in a blue moon.
Yes, that's like, it's getting cheaper now with something that I have really wanted to buy for myself, which is a new mod for the GameCubes called the ETH2GC, which is a open source broadband adapter emulator alternative for the GameCube. It's like it's just a broadband adapter for the GameCube that's not made by Nintendo.
Sick.
And rather than being $100+ they're like $20 or $35.
I love the gaming community so much.
Same. And like that still adds up quite a bit, you know, if you need X GameCubes and that's not cheap in itself. X copies of Double Dash, not cheap in itself. But then there always has been a basically equal, if not more expensive part of get 8 broadband adapters.
Yeah, I have everything except the second copy of Double Dash, which I know people that I can borrow it from.
There you go.
And the broadband adapters. So,
what's it like to be living my dream?
I know. Yeah. So anyway, SoCal Gaming Expo, lots of fun. I met Jason Griffith, the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog from the 4Kids era, all the way up through Sonic and the Black Knights, right before Sonic Colors. Very nice guy. This dude, like, I've been at conventions, like I've been at Magic conventions, and nerds are always a little bit awkward, right? This guy was so good at making conversation and making you feel special and like he was there to talk to you. And I'm like, wow, this guy has people skills. He's a good looking man and he voiced Sonic the Hedgehog. Like,
what's not to
suddenly I am now in love with Jason Griffith. But that's neither here nor there. Obviously, because this was a video game convention with a ton of vendors, I went around and picked some stuff up. So I picked up, same thing as you, 2 GameCube games and 1 not GameCube game. So I got the Ocarina of Time plus Master Quest, which I have the collector's edition, which has like Majora's Mask and the first 2 Zelda games, but never the one with Master Quest. So I had my eye out for that a little bit, found a good price on that, picked that up. Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes, picked that up.
You're a real Metal Gear gamer.
I am now. I used to not really care about the series, but a coworker got me into Metal Gear, and I played through all of the games, played through Peace Walker, some of the spin-offs as well, and I'm excited. Literally, the trailer for Metal Gear Solid Delta, the remake of 3, drops today. I watched that. I'm like, all right, I'm going to be playing this day one. It's going to be great. Love it a lot. It's like American action plus Japanese, like ridiculous storytelling plus weirdness. And it's like such a cool mix of stuff. And then probably the pickup that I'm most excited for, Jet Set Radio Future. Speaking of Dreamcast, kind of. This is the sequel / reimagining for the original Xbox. And what's special about this one is that most of these copies came with that plus a Sega GT 2002 combo disc. And this one did not. So this is like a first printing, first issue.
I was about to say I have Jet Set Radio, but I do have the combo disc. So that's very cool. I didn't actually know that standalones exist.
Standalones exist, and they're a lot more expensive.
Oh, I'll say. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because, like, who wants Sega GT 2002?
I mean, I do.
Not me.
I'll probably buy it at some point.
Classic Sega gamer over here. Look out, everyone.
I mean, I played Sega GT 1 for the Dreamcast. That's a good game. It's basically like Sega's like sim racer.
Yep.
So it's a little bit more arcadey than most sim racers, which is kind of like why I like it. But anyway, Jet Set Radio Future has that combo disc. I've actively avoided the combo disc because I have a modded Xbox, so I'll always burn the games to the hard drive or rip them, excuse me.
Yep.
And the combo disc acts a little bit weird, so I just always kind of wanted them separate. Plus, it's really cool to have like Jet Set Radio Future by itself, just from a collecting standpoint. So they've always been like a little bit too expensive for me, but I found this one for, I think it was 60 in good condition. And I snapped that up pretty immediately. So yeah, really excited about that. Really like it. And I spent no other money on the day because that is plenty of money spent just in those alone.
Yeah, it's a good amount of money. And you did spend a good amount of money on like the last stuff that you picked up too. So you've been really, we started talking about video games and suddenly
I know. We talk about video games, I'm like, oh, I'm excited about video games now. And so then I get into video games.
I know. I've been like fighting for my life to not spend a bunch of money on video games now that I've been talking about video games.
Yeah, hopefully this is it for now. My previous purchase that you alluded to, we'll talk about on the next episode. So we'll save that one. So that way I don't, just buy a bunch of games in a row and be like, oh, well, I could talk about something. It's like a write-off, basically, right?
Oh, yeah, we're totally getting income from this podcast.
Totally.
That's a write-off.
Totally.
All right, Murph. I think that's all we have for this episode. We talked about our pickups. We talked about the Dreamcast. Well, Murph, you taught me a lot about the Dreamcast.
Hopefully taught lots of you out there about the Dreamcast.
Yeah, exactly. Murph teaches Cal and everyone else everything about the Dreamcast. And Cal played Crazy Taxi a lot earlier this week and was bad.
And Sonic Adventure 2.
And Sonic Adventure 2. And Cal will continue playing Sonic Adventure 2.
Yeah, both excellent games, and I'm glad you at least had a little bit of fun with them. I know they're not necessarily everybody's cup of tea, but they're two of my favorites for sure. So.
Yep. Well, that is all we have for you this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And remember,
happy gaming.
Happy crazy taxiing.
Bye.